Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson this coming weekend, live on Netflix. And I've got quite a few mixed feelings on this fight, but we'll get into that in a minute. But I'm joined by the one and only True Geordie. How we doing, mate?
All right, bro. We've just come from the gym. We've just been hitting the pads. It's been good.
Had a good session there, didn't we, mate?
I'm a bit like you, mate. I'm a mixed bag on this because on the one hand, I'm sitting there going, this shouldn't really be happening. And then on the other hand, I'm like, but I will fucking watch the shit out of it. Like, because it's just got that what the fuck factor, hasn't it? Like, it's a bit of a freak show. I mean, how many
100%.
times... You're a fucking boxing historian. What's the oldest boxer that you can remember fighting at a high level? I mean, fuck knows.
Oh God, I mean, I go way back to the Sugar Ray Robinsons, and I study boxing because obviously I was a top amateur myself, boxing for GB. I'm a professional now, so I look at all the greats in boxing. I study them all the time. So to see a legend like Mike Tyson fighting essentially a guy who's been boxing for only 4 to 5 years, a YouTuber, it's unheard of. My natural gut instinct is like, this fight just shouldn't be happening for a couple of different reasons. First of all, Mike Tyson, quite frankly, is an old man now. We know the fight had to be postponed because he had some blood clot or something. He was getting on a plane. So from the health side of it, it's all wrong. And then you look at it at the point of view of, well, Mike Tyson is an experienced professional, one of the youngest heavyweights to win a world title. I think was he 19 or was he 21? I think he was.
He was fucking around there, and he was young as fuck. And I mean,
A
he was one
young
of the most
man.
naturally gifted we've ever seen.
Exactly. So, without doubt, in his prime, Jake Paul wouldn't have been able to even lace his boots. So the fact that they're fighting now is absolute madness, really.
I've got a question for you, Loza, because I've heard like loads of pundits and like boxers, like we're talking Lennox Lewis, all the big names of quite seriously backing Mike Tyson. And I kind of, part of me is like, are you doing this because you're like, if he loses, we're then having to face our own, mortality that, fighters do get old and stop being able to hang with these young kids, even if these young kids aren't that good. Like, let's be real here. Jake Paul's a great YouTube boxer, but when you're judging him as a professional, it's a whole nother ladder you've got to climb. And he's right at the bottom of that ladder, and he's only just started climbing it. And are they backing Mike Tyson because they really think that Jake Paul's in danger? Because some of them seem genuinely worried for Jake Paul. Or do you think that Mike Tyson is a real threat here?
If I'm honest, I just don't understand it, because these so-called boxing experts, to pick an old man, and I mean, this is, us live on the Pain Game. This is why people like what we say, because we say it the way it is. Whereas unfortunately, some of these so-called experts, the kind of agenda behind what they say, and sometimes they're frightened to say the truth, basically. But in this instance, I'm just not sure, because like I say, they're meant to know what they're talking about. And we're talking about an old man at the age of 58. And these same experts are telling the likes of Anthony Joshua, after getting beat off Daniel Dubois, to hang his gloves up. Yet they think it's okay for Mike Tyson to be fighting a young man. It just doesn't make sense.
What about the footage?
I don't get it.
Obviously, we've seen the footage. And look, for a 58-year-old man, we can all say he probably fuck every other 58-year-old up in the world. So he's a beast of a 58-year-old. But are you seeing anything in that footage where you're like, oh, Jake's in trouble here?
The problem is the footage that they put out is heavily edited. We've got like a couple of seconds at a time. So I can't really fully evaluate where Mike Tyson is, because yes,
why
we
is
know
it heavily edited though? Innit? Like if he was doing pads, like banging it out for a full minute, flying through it, would they not leave more footage in? Are they deliberately editing it for that reason?
Well, that's all I can imagine, because I want to see, even 15 seconds, 20 seconds, but to get like 2 seconds and then it's chopped. It's like, I can't get a clear picture, and that tells me they're doing that for a reason, because even if we go back to when he fought Roy Jones, even in that fight, we had two old men. In that fight, I was okay with, because we had two men in a similar age, but this fight, we've got a young man versus a very old man. And even then, Mike Tyson, he looked very clumsy at times. When Roy Jones kind of held his feet, there was little glimpses of what he was in his prime. But when I say glimpses, I'm saying glimpses. He couldn't sustain it. The same velocity and speed wasn't there. His timing wasn't quite there. And 4 years on, of course he's not going to get better. We know even at his peak, when he fought Kevin McBride all them years ago, I think it was about 20 years ago, everybody in the boxing world said he was on the decline then. Yet, now the experts are saying that he could potentially roll the clock back and that Jake Paul could be in danger. Well, I'm sorry. I don't see it. I can't see it happening. And a lot of the footage as well, when he's hitting the bags, it looks explosive, it looks quick, but he's throwing punches very short. He's very close to the bag, or the pad man's very close. So them punches are only traveling a very small distance. So of course they look fast, and he's not really moving his feet that much. So we're gonna have a Jake Paul who, in credit to him, he does make a lot of mistakes, but he does move his feet pretty well. I know at times his weight comes over his front foot, but I've seen him box on the back foot and I've been quite impressed. So I don't think for a moment that Jake Paul's going to stand in front of an older man who, yes, has still got the power. But again, what we'll also say, it's that cliche that everyone says, the power is the last thing to leave a fighter. but what they don't say...
That's what they're trading off, isn't it? That's what they're selling this fight on, by the way. That very line.
Yes, but I'm a boxer, I know boxing. I've been in there with guys of all different ages. And if fighters are honest, the power stays, but what's not there is the timing. And if you can't deliver that punch, the power is no good. You've got to be able to land the shot, and it's the timing which is also the first thing that goes. And with the power,
reflexes, speed,
reflexes,
and not just that, bro. If you look at Tyson's style, there are certain fighters who age like a fine wine, because especially at heavyweight, because obviously they keep their power. But there's some fighters who could just fight on at an old age because they haven't got the most explosive style, right? And it's very technically sound, good defense and stuff like that. Mike Tyson's style was a youthful, athletic, explosive style that requires, all of that shit. And it's very crouched down. You're using a lot of energy throughout your glutes and going up your full body. And you look at him now. I mean, in that, not the McBride fight, the fight before McBride, was it Williams? Danny?
Danny Williams beat him as well, yeah.
I think he blew his fucking knee out in that fight, right? Now, you see him now, he's got a knee brace on in every foot. And part of the thing that I thought straight away when you were on about the bag and how close he is he's not traveling and he's not having to use his feet. Now, here's the thing. Mike Tyson has not got a good reach. Right? For a heavyweight, he's small. He's actually really small for a heavyweight, which makes it even more amazing how great he was. I think I've seen somewhere he's in the low 70s for a reach. So he's going to have to travel. And as much as I think Jake Paul's footwork is very average by pro boxing standards, very good for YouTube boxer, but pro boxing standards, that's going to be a problem, and that's where the youth of Jake Paul, I feel like, is going to cause him issues. And again, they've made it 2-minute rounds, 8 2-minute rounds with 14-ounce gloves. We can get into that in a second. But as much as those 2-minute rounds are going to help Mike Tyson, because that for a big bloke and you're getting older, that extra minute's hard. Jake Paul should be able to sprint that 2 minutes. He should be able to fucking sprint it and then recover super quickly. What do you make of the 14-ounce gloves, by the way, in the 2-minute rounds?
Well, it's been sanctioned as a professional fight, yet professional fighters fight 3-minute rounds, and they also fight with 10-ounce gloves. The lighter weights fight in 8 ounces. So the fact that they're saying that it's a real professional fight doesn't really make sense, but obviously, money talks, and somehow they've managed to sanction it. The fact that it's 2-minute rounds, you're right in saying it's the same in amateur boxing. The shorter rounds, in theory, you think, oh, that might help Tyson, but actually the pace is a lot faster with 2-minute rounds. And, so realistically, I think that might be a bad thing, because like you've just said, Jake Paul will be to go hell for leather for only 2-minute rounds, because he's been fighting at 3s, bearing in mind, Mike Tyson's only fought once in the last probably 20 years. So 2 minutes, 3 minutes, he's not used to fighting. You can train for a fight, you can prepare yourself. But when you've been out the ring that long, it's very hard to get your fitness back. And at the age of 58, so I personally think the shorter rounds will be a problem. And, just going on Jake Paul, forget all his flaws in terms of the mistakes he makes, because at the end of the day, he's only been boxing for 5 years, which is absolutely nothing. But he's still got that power and he's got decent speed. And I just think, like you've just said with the reach side of things, he's got a lot bigger reach. The only thing that's given us a little bit of hope for Tyson is the fact that Jake Paul is really bulked up, and I think that actually might, excuse me, I think that might actually be Jake Paul's downfall, because he's not going to be quite as mobile, but at the same time, he might have a bit more power with the extra size.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so it's one. You know what it is? I kind of go back and forth. I'm trying to create arguments for Mike Tyson of, is there anywhere I can kind of say, oh, this might benefit Tyson? But everywhere I look at it,
Okay.
I just don't see any positives for Mike Tyson's. Unfortunately, he's 58. He's an old man.
Stylistically, the flaws in Jake Paul, if we were to look at those and say, I would look at the fight against Nate Diaz, and I thought he really struggled in that fight in terms of just, he didn't look good. He didn't look good at all. And Nate Diaz is not good. He doesn't belong in there, right? So you're seeing with someone who's got a bit of endurance and a good chin, he can struggle in there a bit. Mike Perry, on the other hand, couldn't live with him. But Mike Perry doesn't have a fucking clue about boxing. He's literally just blocks the punches with his face. So, and with Anderson Silva, he struggled a little bit in terms of, like, Anderson was able to compete with him. And Anderson's nearly 50. So there is you're kind of relying on Jake just not being great as an argument for Mike, because we do know, like, Mike even now at 58 years old moves like a boxer more than Jake Paul does. He moves like someone who knows what the fuck he's doing. It's just the output in terms of, like you say, the speed, the power, what the body is still capable of doing. I wonder early on, I think that's a lot of people's hope, if Mike can catch him with that, like, when he's full of energy, he's got a little bit of juice in the tank at that point, if he can just put something on him and land a glove. The problem where my argument falls down is like, at the end of Mike's career, yeah, he was still hitting people fairly hard. He rocked Williams in his second last fight, and Williams was managed to overcome it. So, but like 20 years, they say power's the last thing to go. And I'm like, yeah, but like when we talk about that, we're talking about like 40-year-old heavyweights who've still got something left, We're not talking about 58-year-old heavyweights. And like you say, the delivery system. If you were to look at this stylistically, is there any... Do you expect Jake Paul to just cover up for the first couple of rounds? Because I think Jake's going to be very careful, and then you let Mike tire out a little bit, and then he's going to try and jump on him.
You know what it is? If I was to say stylistically, you could say, Mike Tyson stands very square, but, that's always been his style. He had great head movement. But his last few fights, his head movement slowed down considerably. And we're now 20 years on. He's basically a pensioner. He's going to get a free bus pass soon. So, that's the fact of the matter. And, the mistakes that Jake Paul makes, I've always said he's got a good jab, but he does fall over his front foot. And he also kind of leans forward, and he's very slow to get out of range sometimes. So if I was to say Mike Tyson 10 years ago, he might be able to capitalize on that.
Yeah,
but, 10 years on, I just can't see it. Everywhere I look at it, I can't see a way stylistically. And like you've just said, I also think that early on, because the only chance that Tyson's got is while he's absolutely fresh, and his hands and his ability to evade punches, which is at this stage in his career is very limited. That's his best chance. So he does need to go straight at Jake Paul. But I think Jake Paul would be very stupid to give him the only opportunity, in my opinion, that Mike Tyson's got, and to hold his feet. So I do think he'll probably be boxing and moving, jabbing. I think he'll probably, for the first round, only be throwing the jab on the back foot, kind of covering up. That's the way I do see it very early on.
Tell you what, bro, do you not think, though, if Jake Paul struggles at all in this, and this goes like, X amount of rounds, if Mike makes a fucking fist of it and actually causes him some problems in there, not only, like, this is a lose-lose, isn't it? Because even if you win, you look like a twat for beating up an old man. But if you struggle let alone lose. I mean, if he loses, fuck me, God knows what that does for his reputation. You're finished,
Yeah.
actually. But even if he struggles, it just makes a joke out of him, doesn't it? Because this whole I'm going to be a world champion one day, and I mean, you just forget it.
100%. Well, you actually touched on a point that I was going to bring up because, you said it in this face-off the other day. Like Jake Paul claims he's one of the fastest, in terms of progress boxers ever. Going from only boxing for 5 years, fighting on such a big stage, and look at them fighting for millions in this fight against, arguably one of the greatest fighter or the most well-known fighter in boxing history, which I do respect to some extent. But at the same time, it's easy to say because he had a lot of money to kind of get that progress to give yourself the best start in boxing. But yeah, it's just
I couldn't disagree
is.
more. By the way, just to put this clear, because I class the lad. I'm friendly with him. I think he's a good lad. I wouldn't necessarily be looking to do this myself if I was him. But then on the other hand, he's on the front page of Netflix, and he's now becoming one of the most talked about boxers in the world. So it's a smart business move. That's one thing I will give him credit for. But when we're talking about his progress as a fighter, I think he made a lot of rapid progress within 2 years. And I think from that point on, I don't know when the Tommy Fury fight was, but I felt like he'd a pro. And ironically, BJ Flores, I think that was the last fight BJ Flores coached him. Since then, I think Jake Paul has gone backwards a little bit. I think his fundamentals are actually getting worse. And I think what I can't take away from him is the money. Yeah, you're the fastest to make a load of money because of what you had outside of boxing from the kickoff. But in terms of progress, I don't know. Maybe I haven't seen that. Maybe if he'd actually put himself in positions against opponents who actually were a real threat, I might have seen that. But I haven't seen that level of progress that he's talking about.
No, you're right in what you're saying. This was his words, and certainly not mine. And I did give him a lot of credit for his progress early on because even if you take away the level of opponent that he was fighting, myself included, early on in my career as an amateur, I was fighting in small workman's club with, probably held a maximum of 400 to 500 people maximum, where he's fighting on the big stage, televised. So that's a lot of pressure on a fighter who's brand new to boxing. So I give him a lot of credit.
Mate, his first ever fight, by the way, I commentated it. And there was 20,000 people in Manchester screaming, booing him. I think that was the hardest boxing debut, aside from Francis Ngannou, maybe, that he had a pretty hard debut. But in terms of environment, it was bloody horrible. The kid's mentally strong. I'll give him that. Yeah.
Well, that's what I give him credit for, because even Francis Ngannou, yes, it was his first boxing debut, but he'd been in the octagon. He was still a fighter, whereas Jake Paul come from a completely different world. But at the same time, probably that's why he was able to deal with it mentally, because in the YouTube world, he's used to the pressure of people's opinions, putting himself out there. So I think there was part of that prepared him for getting into the boxing ring with such a little experience. And it may be, yes, I've got to give him credit in the sense of maybe he's just born for that type of pressure. And I did also say the fact that these guys weren't boxers, but they were still fighters, whether you're an MMA fighter, boxer, kickboxer, it's all a striking sport. So you can carry some of that experience into boxing, even at the fact of, distance and range is a massive part of boxing. And you do learn that in whatever combat you're in. So there's definitely elements that you pull over. So in terms of experience, he was massively over his head. And I do think, at that stage in his career, especially in the first couple of years, like you said, there was a lot of rapid progress. But in the last few years, he has struggled in some of his fights and against some very mediocre opponents, really, like Anderson Silva, another man well past his prime. Nate Diaz, again, well past his prime, who was also MMA fighter.
Also
not
smaller
really
than him.
Smaller physically.
Nate's a smaller guy, as is almost everyone Jake Paul's been fighting.
Well, this is the thing. I give him credit in one respect, but at the same time, he's always made sure every advantage was in his favor. So, he's a very, very smart businessman. Let's put it that way. There's definitely some credit. Go on, sorry.
I was going to ask you: is it worst case scenario though? Here, is it really bad if he just flattens Tyson in the first round and it's not even competitive? Would that be like That would be
That
horrendous for everything involved here.
that is the worst case scenario, and there is part of me wondering, is this fight really legitimate? Because for Jake Paul to be able to do that to an absolute legend in boxing, I would be absolutely devastated. The fact that somehow they've managed to sanction it with 14-ounce gloves and in 2-minute rounds makes me think, has there been some, off the record agreement that if any man gets hurt, that they don't like the step back, they don't fully try to take the man out, which I know I might be living in dream world. And I do think Jake Paul has made a career on, smashing these legends of the sport, whether it's MMA or whatever. But that's what
He's
I'm
dark,
probably
you know.
secretly.
It's weird because I say I kind of like him, but equally, there's a darkness about this guy that I don't think people really. It's funny because when you've watched his journey as closely as I have, I mean, he was my 99th podcast, and he was like a little kid when I met him there. He didn't have the physical frame that he's got now. He's really filled out a lot, and but what I knew about him was he had that killer in him, right? Like because there's a bit of bloodthirst about him, and it's funny because I see some of I watch videos of people breaking this down. And you can tell they haven't got a fucking clue what they're dealing with because they're like, do you think Jake Paul, is he ready for Mike Tyson? Like, would he go for the knockout? Or and I'm like, mate, he's going to want to fucking kill. Like, he is going to want to take Tyson's head off, stand over his lifeless body with his hand in the air as if he's just knocked out prime Mike Tyson and celebrate all night. Like, he doesn't give a fuck what version of Mike Tyson this is because I think for Jake, just saying Jake Paul boxing record, Mike Tyson W. It doesn't matter. That's something for him. This is a validation.
The man's a sick man. He's a very, very sick man because, I say things the way they are. But when it comes to Mike Tyson, when you're talking about these legends, there's a part of me, is in dreamland because I really don't want it to happen. I'm praying it doesn't happen. But you're right. The guy's an absolute sicko. And, if he gets that opportunity to absolutely wipe him out, he's going to do that. And like you said, he will dance over the top of him. He will, the end of the fight, he'll party hard. He'll be given the biggest smack talk ever. And
he's going to call out Canelo, mate. He's already said, I'm calling out Canelo. He wants to sidestep all of that bullshit that everyone else has to go to get to a title shot against Canelo. He just wants to go beat Mike Tyson. That's it. Let me have Canelo.
I really don't think that will ever happen. Canelo, even 10 years from now, will smash Jake Paul. But do
you not think the way Canelo? Let me just play devil's advocate. Look at the way Canelo is moving now. He ain't wanting those Benavidez tests. He wants big money for easy wins or easy enough wins. I wouldn't be surprised if he fucking took it. I wouldn't.
Well, maybe he would, but I don't think Jake would. I think Jake is, like we've said, a very, very clever businessman, and even Jake knows his levels. And I think if he can keep talking it because it's keeping him relevant, he's pissing off all the professional boxers, all the purists, because they know when he mentions Canelo that they absolutely hate it, and they're going to be talking about it.
Is this not his cash out though? He's very carefully played the game and picked his opponents, hand selected them to get him into a position where beating Mike Tyson, even though it doesn't prove anything to actually intelligent boxing fans, but the casual fans, if you beat Mike Tyson and you set up a fight with Canelo, I'll watch it. And for Jake Paul, it's about setting up the mega fight, making a huge amount of money, and cashing out. And as much as he might go in there and go, I'm going to get fucked up off Canelo probably here, but I'll give it my best. That's a hell of a moment for him where he can go, look, I competed for a world title.
Well, that'll be a situation where, again, somehow he manages to maneuver it where it's a win-win situation. No matter who he fights, he's just so intelligent. And, I've got to say, I'm calling him a sicko, but I'm also a sicko, and so are probably you, because we're all going to tune in and potentially witness it happen. And this is what he's clever, because he knows when boxing fans, doesn't matter who's in the ring, will all tune in and watch. And that's what makes it so exciting. And just to get, I know I'm kind of putting Jake Paul down a lot here. I just want to briefly mention one thing I do respect is, he's bringing the likes of Amanda Serrano, he's managed her and got her some big fight opportunities because her career wasn't really going in the right direction. She wasn't getting the opportunities, and Jake's got involved in professional boxing, and he's given these females,
They're getting
opportunities.
paid, bro.
They're getting
You
paid
heard,
properly.
you heard about this. Like, so he was involved in the first fight that got them the biggest female payday. I want to say it was maybe $1 million each, something like that. It was quite historic that women were getting
Yeah.
paid £1 million to fight. I think this one is more like 5 or 6 million quid each. They're getting big money. So well
That's
done to them. Fair
amazing.
play.
That's where I've got to give him huge credit. Because it's a great fight, and just women. There is a part of me. I've been involved with women's boxing because when I was on GB, there was females there. So it's not that I don't, think they deserve them opportunities, because I certainly do. But at the same time, women's boxing don't have the same level of fan base. So I don't think at this point in time that they deserve the same amount of money. I'm just going to put it out there. But I do think they deserve more than they've been getting, and I definitely think they should get more opportunities. So I've got to give Jake Paul credit for that. But yeah, it's a great fight, and we're all definitely going to tune in. And just another thing I want to mention just before we finish off is just to get your prediction. How do you see this fight playing out?
Okay, bro. I think they're going to come out and Jake is going to be nervous. I think he's going to keep his hands real high. Tyson's probably going to go hard to the body a little bit and try and close the distance. He's going to throw some big shots. They're going to probably bounce off the gloves. Jake is going to be in extreme defense mode for the first round or two. And I think once he feels the intensity of those shots diminish slightly as he's getting the jab going and just he just wants to protect himself because he knows in the first couple of rounds that's when Tyson's at his most dangerous. Once he feels the intensity of those shots go down, he's just going to uncork a fucking bomb or two. And that's where we're going to find out the answer. The real answer to the real question of this is, can you still take a shot at 58 years old and continue moving forward and keep going? Because the Rocky movies were great, but they weren't real life. And it does feel like when that happens, I expect Mike to just not be able to take the power of a 27-year-old who's big and strong and can crack, right? Jake isn't a great technical boxer, but he can hit hard. And that should be the end of the fight in the first, 2, 3, 4 rounds, something like that. And I hope to God I'm wrong. I really hope Tyson can make a good go of it and actually embarrass Jake a little bit by making it more competitive than it ever should be. I'd love that for him. And more than anything, I'd love him to win. But what do you think?
Yeah. Just hearing it out loud just makes us sad and just want to cry. I mean, yeah, he's going to... That's the way I kind of see it. I just think... Stylistically, one thing that we know that Jake Paul's been great at is his uppercut. We've seen him knock out a few guys with that uppercut. We know he's got that power. And, going back to stylistically, one thing I really did see when he fought, Mike Tyson fought Roy Jones is he was also a bit like Jake Paul, falling over his front foot, but he had his youth on his side to get out the way most of the time. Whereas Mike Tyson was falling over his front foot and he looked like Bambi at times. His legs just weren't underneath him. And, Mike Tyson's always stood quite square on, but he had that great head movement. But at 58, that head movement just isn't there. And I also see exactly the same as you said. I think Jake Paul is going to have that nervous energy because there'll be part of him unsure if Mike Tyson has still got that power. He'll want to test his speed. He'll just want to stay out of danger early on. But I do see an uppercut. For some reason, I just visualize Mike Tyson. He's going to put the pressure on him. He knows he can't box with a bigger man. He's got that extra range advantage. His feet aren't as quick, so he needs to try to get close somehow. I don't know how he's going to manage it, but I do see Jake Paul landing a devastating uppercut. And I think, you know what I mean? Jake Paul's going to get what he wanted, and he's going to get his reel. And oh God, it's. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm struggling to say the words because it's so painful. Because, like I say, Tyson is back in the day when I was quite young watching boxing for the first time, Mike Tyson was one of the guys where I stayed up late at night. I would set my alarm and kind of get up to watch Mike Tyson. I think the last one I watched late at night was against Lennox Lewis. And I was devastated then because, again, it was a Mike Tyson well past his prime. He didn't want it anymore. He didn't, forgetting these physical attributes. I think he was just in there for the money at the time. Don King had rinsed him for every pound that he had left in the bank. And he just didn't want to be in the ring anymore. I think there's that clip where Mike Tyson's in the corner. I'm pretty sure it's that fight where he's shaking his head. He doesn't really want to go out for another round. And his corner have to motivate him to get out there and fight another round. And then he gets knocked out cold by Lennox Lewis. So yeah, I just see a devastating knockout.
He literally quit on his stool against McBride in the last fight, and that was when it was accepted of he doesn't want it anymore. And that's where you wonder what the fuck is going on. But let's see, mate. Let's see. We'll see on Friday night.
Friday night. Well, like I say, us sickos are all going to tune in and see what happens. But yeah, let's all pray for Mike Tyson, because I'm not a religious man, but I'll certainly be praying, because all I want is for him. I don't want him to be knocked out cold, even if he gets stopped on his feet. Ideally he makes it to the end of the fight, but if he gets stopped on his feet, I'll be happy. But to see him get knocked out cold I really don't want to see that. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Everyone, make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you, Brian, for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.